Hello, I'm Brandon,
And I'm Mom.
and welcome back to Tansson Talks TV.
Yes, welcome back. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, we are very excited for you to join us. And Mom, how are you doing, and what show are we speaking about today?
Brandon, I am doing fine. Thank you so much for asking. Today, Brandon, we're actually going to speak to one of our commenters. We're speaking about a show that one of our commenters mentioned. And today we're going to talk about Mork and Mindy.
Yes, we are speaking about the show Mork and Mindy, and to provide a little bit of information, so Mork and Mindy is a television sitcom created by Gary Marshall, starring Robin Williams and Pam Dauber, and it ran from 1978 to 1982 for 91 episodes. It is a spinoff of the series Happy Days and is produced by the Henderson Production Company, Miller Milkis Productions, and Paramount Television.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I'm excited for us to get into these episodes. And Mom, are you able to do us the honors of giving us the synopsis for the pilot episode and episode 3, Mork Moves In?
Sure, Brandon. This is actually going to be very brief because the 10 points that I go over kind of talks a little bit about the episode itself. So overall, even though we're talking about 3 episodes, it's really pretty simple. We are talking about Mork, who is an alien. He actually arrives on Earth and meets Mindy, and they were kind of given his backstory in the first episode.
Cool. Well, thank you, Mom, for the synopsis.
You are welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, and if you are able to go ahead and go right into your top 10.
I sure will. All right, and so Brandon, for our top 10 this week, it's a premiere. And so has to do with the premiere type of things that we look for. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit really about the series, and then as I'm doing that, it's based upon this first episode. And so we know that for the first 3 episodes that Mork arrives on Earth, and and we do learn that he's been on Earth for 3 times, and so this we believe is his third time coming to Earth. um, During the first episode, also his backstory is given. The backstory was originally was given through Happy Days. He was introduced on Happy Days previously, and during the first episode, they kind of reflect back on Happy Days and kind of explain a little bit about why he was there, and then his experience being there the first time. And then we're told also during this first episode that Mork was sent to Earth to watch primitive society. Um, when he arrives by an egg, and he just kind of lands. He meets Mindy at that time. Mindy is a single lady. She was out on a date, and so her date actually ends up taking her car, and so she's kind of stranded. But she meets Mork, and Mork kind of befriends her. She thinks he's a priest just because of the way he's dressed, and so they go off so that they could actually. So Mindy Hughes walks with her, or however she gets home, so that she can get home safely. Um, when they do arrive home, she does realize that this is not a priest, and when she does that, he gives a little bit about his story and kind of indicates that he is an alien from another planet. We do find out that he does meet weekly with his, I don't know, leader, and his name is Orson. And we find out that, and he has to report back to Orson about his findings on Earth, since he was sent there because they want him to look at the quote unquote primitive society. Um, and so we do find out during this first 3 episodes also, that Mindy is single. She works for her father's music store. We find out that her father is a widow, and that Mindy's maternal grandmother works for the store also. We discover also that Mindy's grandmother is more progressive than her father, as she seems to be really hip with everything that she does. Mindy's father does not like that Mork may potentially live with Mindy. They do find out that Mork is there, and the father is not too pleased about that. Now, her grandmother and her father, at least at this point in time, do not know that he's from another planet. Mindy decides to keep that to herself. We learn that Mork has an interesting thought process and depends on a sense of humor in order to get around. And then we know that throughout the series that we will kind of watch Mork as he assimilates and adapts to life on Earth.
Well, Mom, thank you so much for your top 10.
You're welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, and in analyzing, these first three episodes, I want to put a special focus on, the first two being the pilot episode, which was shown somewhat as a TV movie. And so for these characters, they are introduced in the show by having them meet in the woods. And so in this case, Mindy is leaving the woods after being abandoned by her date, whereas Mork just landed there, quite literally. And typically, I believe a big change happens on these first episodes, especially pilot episodes. And in this case, it is Mork being introduced into Mindy's life. And given that this is a spin off series, usually there's a big connection to the parent series in this case. And this one does not differ from that at all, with the pilot episode connecting straight back into the parent series Happy Days. Though in this case, it's actually intriguing because Happy Days actually takes place in a completely different decade than Mork and Mindy does. And so, in order to connect it back, they have a flashback, so to speak, for about half the episode that really connects everything back that we'll speak about a little bit in our discussion. But overall, I definitely think that this is quite an intriguing, pilot episode showcase, and I just can't wait for us to get into our discussion.
Yep, that sounds great, Brandon.
And so, Mom, overall, what did you think of these first three episodes of the series Mork and Mindy?
Well, I'll go back a little bit, Brandon, and tell you what I kind of remember, what I don't remember. Um, I do remember watching it. I remember actually all three episodes. Um, I did not remember details. I just remember generic information. I remember Mork being, coming down. I remember the egg. Um, I remember them kind of sort of moving it together. I remember the father. Not necessarily that he worked in a music shop, but I just remember the father had some sort of a store, and that would be Mindy's father. Um, I did not realize that that was Mindy's grandmother that was on there. And I did remember there was a small child in the series, and apparently this is a child who is just getting music lessons. Um, but in details on that part, I did not remember per se. So as to whether or not I watched it when I was younger, yes, I did watch Mork and Mindy. I did. I watched it with my sister, and so we did watch Mork and Mindy together. I do not remember details because it's been many, many years since I have actually sat and watched it all the way through. And so I won't tell you how many years, Brandon. It's just been a long time. Had you seen any episodes of Mork and Mindy?
Yes, I've seen several episodes of Mork and Mindy, but I don't think it's necessarily been intentional viewing per se. More so that it just, had come on and I would watch it if it was on, but not a lot of intentional viewing. But of course, I am quite familiar with its parent series Happy Days. I'd seen quite a few of those episodes, but that was back in 2010, so I don't entirely remember them, but I do actually remember the first two episodes of Mork and Mindy. I just didn't remember it was those episodes.
Yeah, and just to go back just a little bit, you mentioned Happy Days. I do remember when Robin Williams was on Happy Days the first time, in which regard, and when he came on, that I do remember. Of course, it would have been in reruns, but I do remember watching that.
Yes, and so as a little bit of a background, going back a little bit, so the series Happy Days ran for 11 seasons on
Mhm.
ABC, going from, I believe, yes, the series Happy Days ran for 11 seasons from 1974 to 1984, and Yeah, it definitely was a long running series. Some would say it jumped the shark quite intentionally, but nevertheless, though, it spawned several spin off series, Mork and Mindy being one of them. But but the character of Mork was introduced as a one off character on Happy Days, and it became just the episode became so popular that before it even aired, they put it into a spin off series, and and here we are. It has its whole series with almost 100 episodes of its own.
Yes, very true.
Yeah, and what was interesting, speaking of spin-off series, though, is not only did this episode of Mork and Mindy, connect back with the series Happy Days, it also connected with a sister series of it.
Yep, Laverne and Shirley, and I watched that one too, Brandon. So yes, it did. We haven't talked about either of those series, or at least in any type of real depth, for this particular program. If anyone wants us to do that, then just please put it down below. But yes, it is. It's interesting to see all how all three of them connect together.
Yes, and so the series Laverne and Shirley is yet another spin-off of the series Happy Days. That one ran from 1976 to 83, and that's a series I'm also quite familiar with. And so we did see Laverne from that series, Penny Marshall, on the first, the pilot movie, so to speak, of Mork and Mindy. And so, as a fun tidbit for that, is that Penny Marshall, who plays Laverne, is the sister of Gary Marshall that created all three of these series.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, and so I know you said that you remembered that these connections were in the pilot movie, but did you remember it being practically half this episode?
No, I didn't. I didn't remember that. I didn't realize that it was an hour, or maybe it was two episodes that were just put it together. I don't know. But when we watched it, I just remember saying, "This is very long. This has got to be more than a half hour." And so I didn't quite realize it was an hour when we started watching it. Um, and so, you know, and then really an hour and a half because we needed actually all three episodes to kind of blend them together to see the groundwork that was set with this particular series.
And yes, and because we did see all three of the first episodes, so like we mentioned before, the first two episodes truly were a television movie pilot, whereas episode three was the first regular episode, but it repeated many of the same points from the pilot episode.
Yeah.
And so usually in that case, there's usually like a gap between airing, but in this case there wasn't. It just happened to, I guess, repeat itself. So there may have been a time difference from when the two were recorded that I'm unaware of, but I did find it somewhat intriguing because a lot of times you don't really repeat that many points, going one week to the next.
Yeah, and after we watched really episode two per se, because we watched that one first, I remember saying to you that something was missing. I was like, "Where is the egg?" And that's when you kind of did a little digging and said, "Oh, there's another episode out there. Let's check that one out."
And yes, and while we know that the pilot episode that we saw, is indeed the pilot episode that was released, doing a little bit of research, it was interesting to find out that to sell the series to ABC, that that they it was actually like a whole bunch of clever editing where the times that Mork was on Happy Days alongside a failed pilot for Pan Dauber, who plays Mindy, was sort of just mashed together to make a prototype episode in order to sell the series. So it's really interesting that the actress hadn't even met, when the series was picked up.
That is interesting. Wow, wow, and it's hard to imagine now.
Yes, definitely. And yeah, but I mean overall I think it's just such an interesting concept for a show. And what are your thoughts about the fact that this show took place in what was then present day of the late 1970s, whereas both Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley took place about 20 years prior?
Well, Actually, Brandon, that is an interesting question that you ask. The time difference, I think, it's an interesting perspective. And in the um, episodes that kind of air, Mork made a point of saying that he erased the time for the Happy Days time period. And so hearing him say that was kind of an interesting perspective. Um, and watching it now, people are not going to realize that Happy Days took place 20 years prior, and that this is really reflecting a second time period. But if you think the fact that he's an alien, he could potentially be one who kind of skips time periods. I don't know. You're not supposed to remember that this is it took place probably within a year or so, from one episode to the next, from one season to the next with these shows. Um, but um, but since they made a point of saying that Mork was erasing things, and we can just kind of pretend that he was on Earth during the time period that he says he was on Earth, you can ignore the time period part if that makes sense.
Well, he does actually address that he was on Earth 3 bleems ago. We don't
Yeah.
exactly know what a bleem is, but we can presume that it's a considerable amount of time. And so, I
Yes.
mean, like you said, I mean, if it's right in, and I mean, the alien logic, I mean, makes sense with it all.
Yes. I mean, everyone has to have alien logic, right?
Of course.
Uh huh.
And yeah, but what are your thoughts about the theme song, Mom?
The theme song's just okay. It's memorable in the fact that when you hear it, you know it's Mork and Mindy. But so I would just give it a 6. It is because they're, how I feel. There's got to be words. Since there aren't words, I'm not quite singing it all the time, and it's not a song that makes me. I don't think about the song at night, if that makes sense. It's not one that I'm going to theme song that I'm going to sing or hum. But you do when you hear it, you know it's Mork and Mindy. So I'd give it a 6.
But yeah, I mean, I've overall really enjoyed these 3 episodes and viewing them, and I don't know, it was a more of a enjoyable watch than I remember for the series. And like I said, I've never like not enjoyed the series. It's just maybe not one I will tune on as a regular series I would watch, but I mean, I think almost all the viewings are enjoyable though.
Yeah, and actually, Brandon, I was surprised that I actually like all 3 episodes. Like I said, I watched it, of course, during that time period, but I was much younger when I watched it. Um, but watching it now, because as an adult, it does appear to be kind of a silly series. But then when I watched it again, this time with you, it was like, oh, this is not that bad if you sit and just kind of concentrate on it. And Mork has some insightful things to tell Orson. And so you do have to listen to some of the underlying things that are kind of said in regards to people in general, that just some characteristics and things like that, that I guess they're trying to say as a new perspective on viewing things.
Yeah, it definitely does, and yeah, and so overall, I guess, and even though that we're speaking specifically about Mork and Mindy, do you believe that the viewing fits right in with the other Happy Days series?
With the Happy Days series, yeah, it's the same kind of good feeling that you kind of get when you watch Happy Days with Laverne and Shirley. I mean, Mork and Mindy's just a fun show to watch.
So, as a little bit of a Tansson Talks TV connection, little Easter egg, is that this series is produced by Miller Milkus Productions, and that is actually the predecessor company of Miller Boyette Productions that produced the series Valerie that we spoke about.
Yep, like Brandon, we're just finding themes all the time. There is a thing that we like to watch, so yeah.
Yes, and yeah, and Miller Boyette, of course, is known for a lot of other successful series, such as Full House, and of course, Fuller House, and a lot of the ABC TGIF lineup of the 1990s.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And I'm so glad that we had someone who actually made a suggestion for us, and we were actually able to go and watch this particular episode, you know, based upon their suggestion.
Yeah, definitely continue giving us suggestions, and we'll keep watching.
Yep, that sounds great, Brandon.
Yeah, well, definitely continue tuning in, and we can't wait to tune into the next episode with you.
Yep, that is the same here. We look forward to singing to you next time, and kind of like what Mork would say, nanu nanu.
Yes, well, nano nanu to you as well, and we'll see you in the next episode.
All right, have a good evening, everyone.